host so you can share your screen. All right, so welcome everybody to our, you know, the new reality of our programs at the Garden Photographic Society. You know, we're a club that meets at the Chicago Botanic Garden twice a month. We have competitions the first Thursday of the month and a program the third Thursday of the month. We have some upcoming events coming up after this event. On June 4th, we'll have a talk from Karthika Gupta about the art of storytelling in travel photography. You can get more info at karthikagupta.com. Also, of course, all these, you can get all these at our website, gardenphoto.org. Then on June 18th, we have Steve Gettle will be presenting Caught in Motion, Photographing Action. For that Zoom event, you can't just click, you have to register. Steve created the event. You have to register, and the link to register is right there on our homepage at gardenphoto.org. June 16th, we have a program from Sarah Marino. Sarah was one of the people who presented at the Out of Chicago online weekend. And I thought she did an amazing, wonderful job. I was really inspired by her talk. And she's like the first person I called to get, you know, onto these from that event. While after her presentation was over, I ran and got my camera because she had given me so many ideas on what to shoot in my front yard. I've lived here 10 years and I hadn't seen, like, suddenly I saw like 10 different shots that I hadn't seen until I heard Sarah's talk. So she'll be coming up on, when's she coming up? July 16th, also at 7:15. All right, so without any further ado, let me find John. John Williams is our talker tonight. While reading from his PDF, John Williams is a passionate and accomplished photographer. While photography is not his primary profession, he does have many of his Chicago area architectural prints hanging now in professional offices and homes. John lives in Algonquin and is member and past president of Lake County Camera Club and member of the Crystal Lake Camera Club, as well as the CACA community. Modern digital photography presents a perfect intersection of technology and art, which John has found totally engaging with his technically inclined interests. John enjoys a wide variety of photographic styles and subjects. His favorites include architecture, astro, cityscapes, landscapes, travel, and nature. John has presented numerous programs to the photographic community, including PSA and CAPS, and is an experienced competition judge and participant. John Williams, I'm now making you the host.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to seeing your discussion. I'm a big fan of architectural photography.
That's great. It is an old form. I think I put it on that bio thing. It goes way, way back. The oldest vintage photo that's been able to be preserved was actually an architectural type of photograph. But hello to all of my friends out there in photography world, and a special hello to my Camera Club member friends of Lake County Camera Club and Crystal Lake Camera Clubs.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, hold on. Okay, now I had to unmute you back.
That's okay. I was able to, well, maybe you turned me back on.
Right, because I heard somebody else was on.
Anyway, I haven't quite run through this presentation to time it, so I'm going to keep moving kind of quickly just to make sure I try to get through it. And if I get through pretty fast, which I doubt, but get through pretty fast, that'll leave a little more time for Q&A at the end. And so anyways, this will be architectural photography according to John Williams. We all have our own perspectives, of course, and our own preferences and our own ways of placing emphasis on what we think are important in photography. And that's why we can all go and do a photo shoot together of a particular area or a building, just like anything else in photography, and come away with completely different results. So this will be some of my results, and I'll try to chime in all the time on what I was doing and why I was doing and what I felt was important about some of these things. But first, I'm just going to start running through a bunch of examples for you know, the breadth of architectural photography. Usually architectural photography has something to do with the buildings, or it can be something to do with structures or bridges, things like that. And so this will just run through just a bunch of different things. These are exteriors. I'm jumping between Chicago, Milwaukee, Seattle, out in Delaware, I think that was, on the beach, Atlantic Ocean. This is downtown at the Holy Name Cathedral. And this section here, I'm just trying to show some perspective differences too, between color, choices of color and monochrome or black and white. You know, one of the things that's really nice about architectural photography is that when you look at it in color, and a lot of it with the detail and textures and tones available in architectural photography, they also lend themselves really well to black and white. And it's also interesting that a lot of times what you really notice in the color versions, as you're probably all aware, changes sometimes when you're seeing the same images in black and white. But it's been particularly fun for me as a participant in competitions and so forth with our CACA comrades, that it's easy for me to take a lot of these photos. Of course, our new digital cameras are capturing everything in color, and then determining afterwards which way I like it better, color or black and white. It's a church downtown Chicago, Riverwalk in Chicago. Same picture. Really they do come off completely different. Then this is just a little section on curves and lines of interest. This is one of the libraries at the University of Chicago. This is up in Milwaukee. I am a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual, so one day I got a pass and I went up to the you know, Northwestern Mutual home offices in Milwaukee, and I ran around the whole day just on my own, and I was just shooting pictures. This is up on the 8th floor at the top of a gorgeous staircase and marble and everything. And this is back up to Milwaukee again. This is just demonstrating curves and lines. And of course, there's so many interesting buildings. That's the Discovery Museum up there. This is down in Austin, Texas. This is the Capitol building inside. I think they have the tallest dome next to Washington, D.C.'s dome down in Texas, where everything is big. This is out in Salt Lake City. You know, the degree that these architects go to, you know, it's got to cost a heck of a lot more money to build a building that's curved like that and not straight. And then here we go back and same thing. This is one of the buildings with music and so forth at Evanston, Northwestern University. Then, of course, there's always the option whether or not you're going to be interested in leaving people in the shot, as in this case where they're having an art display, and this is the Capitol building in Madison, Wisconsin. This is the Wisconsin State Capitol building. Or here, this is the rotunda downtown at the Elks Memorial building near Lincolnwood there, and Lincoln Park. And you know, I opted not to have any, even though this was a small group of photographers all in there all at the same time. There was maybe 8 of us or so, but we were all respecting each other and getting out of each other's way as much as we could. And then other perspectives, getting down close to ground levels in some of these fabulous structures where you may want to be emphasizing the ceilings, ceiling structures, and so forth. There's this is that was the one on the left was St. Josephat in Chicago. This is the Rockefeller Memorial or is it chapel or temple? Chapel, University of Chicago, Hyde Park. That's another one of St. Josephat again, from the ground up. This one is actually not a church. This is that, it's a fraternity national headquarters building that's right across the street from the Evanston campus of Northwestern University. Some of these I've been participating, of course, in Open House Chicago events that are every year in October, or Doors Open Milwaukee that's also every October, usually a couple weeks before Open House Chicago. This is one of the oldest churches downtown. This is in Old Town Chicago, St. Michael's. This is traveling by plane now way far away. This is down in Melbourne, Australia, where my son's family lives. That's again one of the older churches. This is downtown Chicago. This is like the top-down perspective, and this is the Palmer House, the ballroom in the Palmer House there. This is also Northwestern University. This is the Alice Miller Hall. This goes back down to Melbourne.
Hey, John.
Arts Center. Yes, sir.
It takes a second for the screen to draw.
Okay. So
yeah.
I got to be careful.
Right, now we just saw the Palmer House. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it took a while for the screen to draw. So like give it a second after you change, slides.
Okay.
So we're at Palmer House.
You're still at Palmer House?
No, now I see the Alice Miller Chapel.
There's Alice Miller on the left, and that's the Arts Center in Melbourne on the right. You got that so far? Another interesting kind of a entry area at the Northwestern Mutual offices in Milwaukee. And then another top-down perspective at a Catholic church out in Johnsburg, Illinois. And this, of course, is, I don't know how fast these are coming in. This is one of those famous locations in Chris Smith's, Photographer's Guide to Chicago, from the parking lot downtown, looking at the L. And then I've turned on one of the shots I got in the summertime a few years back from the John Hancock Center at late afternoon, right? Golden hour. And then a lot of the indoor architectural shots that I've done, to the point that some people are saying, boy, that's getting boring, John, you got to get some other perspectives. But these straight-on symmetrical frames, this happens to be the business school at University of Chicago. They're straight-on symmetry. And of course, what's extremely important in symmetrical architecture is complete balance, edge to edge, top to bottom. This one's one of the reading rooms at University of Chicago. This one is a St. Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne, Australia, with very, very interesting looking materials that they built that out of. This is a little seminary up in Wisconsin. This is the St. Mary of the Angels church in Chicago. part of the Polish churches. There's Alice Miller again, straight on. Holy Name, downtown Chicago, looking back at the pipes. I happen to have a lot of music in my background, so I pay attention to pipes every time I can. And then angles. One of the cool aspects of architectural photography and just doing things like the river walk downtown and so forth is all the different angles and lines that you can find to shoot from different perspectives. Here we're getting a little bit away now from those straight on symmetrical shots inside of, so that was an old church down in south side of Chicago. This is once again in that Elks Memorial, the grand reception room. This is down in Melbourne again, but all I'm including these for is the right angles, left angles, completely different results when you get off center, and they're still symmetrical to a degree. They're very carefully, done for lines, but they're different angle perspectives and so forth. So, and then day and night, there you have the opportunity for completely different views of basically even the same location. So I don't know if this is coming through yet, but this is the day shot of the pavilion, Lincoln Park area there, and completely different look, almost the same image, completely different when you shoot that at nighttime. Daytime shots are fun. That's the Mary B. Park in the West Loop, Chicago. Up from the top of the restaurant that's in that, the tall residential building. What's it called? I forgot the name of it right now. There's the Aqua building and the residential park area that's enclosed to all of those tall residential buildings downtown Chicago. And just another demonstration again of how different colors add. This was taken when the Cubs were doing their weekend of playoffs. And so Chicago turned completely blue with lights, and pretty much anyways, yeah. Day and night, completely different looks. Downtown again. Nighttime at Fulton Market District. Boy, this is going to end up looking quite different every year right now because they're having so much construction going on down there. Getting some light trails. I was freezing down there when I was taking that. This is an evening shot. I included it for architecture because it's got my sister's place up on the bluff here included in it, but I love astrophotography and that kind of photography as well. So I was able to, while we were staying and visiting with them and so forth, I made the arrangements to get out there and get down there and get that shot that night. It was fun. They live up in Harbor Springs, Michigan, where the skies are dark. Here we're downtown again. Colors are just luminescent many times with night scenes in downtown cityscapes and things. Corncob Towers.
It hasn't changed yet.
Ah, okay.
We're still on the Michigan. Oh, there you go. Okay.
You see the performing center?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And then just some more Chicago night. Always enjoyed it. We've done bus tours and so forth for the club and so forth, gone down there to do that. Bridges are particularly great subject to shoot for architectural photography downtown as well as, in the parks. That happens to be a bridge that is in Olympic National Park, if anybody recognizes the area. This is shot from Deception Pass in the state of Washington there, near Puget Sound as it goes out the bridge there. And maybe sometime it'll come up. This is a shot of the harbor bridge there in Sydney. Are you seeing that yet, Carlos? Yeah, okay. This one's got just a funny little story behind it, because we flew into and visited Sydney and then went on to Melbourne, where my kids live, a week later. But the first day that we were there, the time zone change is so tremendous that I couldn't sleep past, I think it was 2:30 or 3 a.m. So I got dressed and I went out, and I even caught a cab, and I knew I had wanted to shoot this thing. And it was a Sunday morning at the wee hours. So this picture was actually ended up being taken about 4:30 a.m. in the wee hours of Sunday morning. And when I did that, this is actually several exposures, because then in comes this cruise ship. You know, the cruise ship requires a shorter shutter speed so that you can lock in enough on it, because it's in motion all the time as it's docking, versus architecture. Generally, the bridge or buildings and so forth, they're not in motion at all. So you can use as long a shutter speed as you want, and the architecture is going to be clear. It'll just blur other things that are in motion, which is not a problem for clouds or water or things like that. So that's a multiple, a blend. And we're going to get into that after this little section here. I'm going to start to show different processing techniques and things. Structures are, you know, incredible nighttime scenes. Stairs are extremely good subject for architectural photography. This is the Cultural Center downtown Chicago. I have I probably am going too fast sometimes as I flip these, but maybe they'll kind of come through in sequence for you a little bit. And then the image on the right, that's inside the business school, Kellogg of Northwestern University. This is coming up is an interesting staircase in an old mansion in Australia, shot with a tilt shift lens, and we'll talk about that some as well. Then I'm shifting over to the staircase in a mansion that we've got in the Chicagoland area out in DuPage County. It's Elwood Mansion. We had a little excursion out there once.
Not there yet.
Not there yet?
Oh, now it's there.
That's the staircase in that mansion, which is kind of the centerpiece in the house at the end of the hall. And then is the one coming up on the right?
Yes.
That's the stairways entering the CTA station in Pilsen. You know, Pilsen in Chicago is where there's so many murals that have been done in the Pilsen area, and they follow through with the theme. The Pilsen theme follows through even at the CTA station there. Architectural office, part of Open House Chicago. The staircase with the knight there, that is the Cuneo mansion in Vernon Hills, Illinois. What else have I got? A couple more stairs. Modern stairs. Yeah, as it comes up. That's a shopping mall in Melbourne. And a vertical type shopping mall. So they really did an incredible job of interior decor going up. And then I think the last one I've got here for stairs is shooting down the spiraling stairs at the Northwestern Mutual old office headquarters. It was built in 1905, I think it was. Oh, here we go. This is reflections, where we're getting reflections. Now, reflections are things that you can either get because you want them, or reflections are things you can eliminate by using a polarizing filter on the camera. And I think several of these are with the desired effect having the reflections. So I don't think I was attempting to remove those reflections. This is down at the river walk again, where we're getting reflections off of the stainless steel and so forth, and off the river and the colors. It's a lot of fun shooting downtown Chicago. Back up in Milwaukee at Discovery Museum. A lot of times night photography for architecture is going to enable you to very easily, or whether you want to or not, use long shutter speeds. And in this case, the clouds were in motion, so we're getting plenty of streaking clouds at nighttime downtown over the buildings. And then we move out to panoramics pretty much. This is out in Phoenix, Arizona, where they have man-made water areas that like lakes, and they are calm as anything because it's surrounded by desert. My youngest son lives out in Phoenix. That's back in Sydney, Darling Harbor. That's Sydney. I want to get past these, but I don't want to go too fast to way overshoot them. I apologize for the time delay. Here's a panorama from Seattle, getting on one of those, car ferries that takes you across the Puget Sound. This is downtown Chicago, one of the Frank Lloyd Wright houses that are very close there to University of Chicago area. This is a longer exposure, so you can see a very, very, very calm Lake Michigan, although this is also early morning on the Gold Coast of Chicago. And then for panoramas, I do quite often, I don't bypass the opportunity to do vertical panoramas. It's easy to do very tall ones using a tilt shift lens, which I do use quite often. So you can see all the way, this image on the left is the City Hall in Milwaukee, where you can see the floor and you can see the ceiling on an 8th story that I'm shooting from the 3rd floor. Kind of fun, different perspectives that aren't typical. This shot over on the right of the Aqua building, that is, of course, downtown, but that's from the Prudential building during Open House Chicago, where they allowed us up on the 32nd floor. And so I took a series of images to try to capture the entire building from sky to ground, and then merge that together to a vertical panorama later. This is also a vertical panorama using a tilt shift lens, where it's shifted down in order to get down into this sunken in rotunda area, and then up to get the sky and the Capitol building there in Austin, Texas. And what you can also notice, of course, is that I was there from earlier in the evening, sunset time, almost golden hour, and I was also staying late enough to for all the lights to be turned on inside the buildings and down below, so that I could blend later the look of nighttime with internal lights and still have the sunset sky over the building. So that's blended later on in Photoshop. And everybody, probably everybody participating has taken that shot. This one was just before that those clouds poured cats and dogs on us on a bus tour, but we just climbed into the bus just before the downpour of rain hit us. These types of panoramas, of course, are vertical frames. There's several of them here. I don't even remember how many. And each one I'm doing as a bracketed set of 3, and then merging all of that together later, HDR panorama. So let's get into the aspects of architectural photography. one of the very, very important aspects of architectural photography is the quality of focus and sharp images, which is actually one of the reasons that attracts me to it. It's got its own challenges. Naturally, on many other types of photography, you've got completely different challenges, like if you're going to even get the animal, or you're going to get the right light. But in architectural photography, the challenge is trying to get everything in focus as tack sharp as possible and get your lines straight, and get past the typical problems that lenses have with distorting properties and so forth. So that's, and of course, I live in Chicagoland. We don't have mountains all the time to go out and photograph, so we do have mountains that are man-made downtowns. So that's where got me involved 10 years ago, starting in on doing the architectural shots. So this is just to demonstrate, the importance of focus and being tack sharp. This was a nighttime image, also taken with some of my friends while we were attending Open House Chicago, which is a weekend of 2 days, where they let you, address or access a lot of locations around Chicago. And I just zoomed in here at least 1-to-1 so that you could see, the aspect of tack sharp focus is extremely important in these kinds of images. Here's one of that Alice Miller Hall. I'm giving this a little pause to load in, and then here's at least a 1-to-1 zoom, where obviously to have the right impact, these images have to be tack sharp. So we're not using automatic focus aspects on the camera normally, and if we do, we're still double checking focus manually after we've used autofocus on the cameras. This is St. Josaphat Cathedral, or up in Basilica, actually, up in Milwaukee. And and then this is, and it's actually an old one, at a lower resolution camera and everything, but still spending the time to get that focus and get that camera positioned correctly to get the shot is half the battle, and getting the focus fine-tuned to be certain that it's right. So you do that. It's best to typically use live view mode, or for those of you shooting mirrorless, you're always shooting in what was called live view mode for DSLRs, and that way you're enabled to zoom in to the maximum degree that you can on the back of the camera, or in your electronic viewfinder on a mirrorless camera allows you to zoom way in and double check your focus in the area that you want to be in focus on. A lot of times, since I'm always shooting manual, completely manual for architectural shots, and a lot of times the only reason I put this on here is because I'll have my camera set up for architectural shooting before I go on an architectural type of a excursion. And I'll have my memory positions preset for the typical and manual type of shooting that I do. So it's always good to learn how to set up your camera and easily change your memory settings, because as soon as I go and do wildlife photography or even landscape photography, I'm changing those memory positions just so that I don't have to think too much about all the various settings when I'm on site. I put this picture in here because I think everybody would agree it looks pretty darn sharp. But this picture is a picture where instead of just carefully focusing with the camera lens, this is taken from the bridge. And so the bridge, I'm out there almost in the middle, I think it's the Lake Street bridge. And of course there's traffic, even though this might be late at night. I think it was getting close to 11 o'clock or 10:30 or something. So there's still in downtown Chicago is quite a bit of traffic on a major street like that. So I knew I was getting all of this bridge shake. And in order to try to secure a workaround later in post-process, what I did is I was shooting, this is back, oh, long enough ago. Whoop, what happened there? Sorry about that. I'm getting back to it. So this was shot in order to be sure I was capturing the full dynamic range. There's a lot of man-made lighting going on in there, and yet of course it's nighttime, so there's a lot of dark areas under the bridge and back behind buildings and things like that. So you want to capture the wide dynamic range, and I was shooting 5 exposures, brackets, and the longest exposure time, you can see the shortest exposure time is 1/8 of a second, but the longest exposure time was 30 seconds long. And here I'm on top of a bridge that's got these vehicles once in a while coming across and shaking it. So what I did is I did 5 sets, as well timed as I could, but I did 5 sets of exposure brackets. And then when I got back home, I was able to literally pick as many of the clean ones as I could from the various exposure levels in order to ultimately produce the image. And then kind of on the same philosophy as that, one of the ones that's one of my newer images from downtown. Now I'm not actually shooting 5 brackets anymore. I'm usually the maximum is 3 brackets, 2 stops up and 2 stops down from a normal exposure level. But here I was also on a crossover bridge. This is a location that's also spelled out in Chris's guide to photographers for Chicago. It's along the L, and it's at one of the stations where they have a bridge that you can walk up and over to the other side to go the other direction. But that bridge is on top of an elevated station. So the elevated station itself is shaking from the trains coming through and people walking. And then you go on the crossover and it's shaking even more. And so I knew that was going to be a great danger in what was going on. So in this case, I raised my ISO, I think, to 400, because I normally will shoot at nighttime down at 100 or 200 at the most, usually 100, sometimes even less. But I went up to 400 to make my shutter speeds shorter to protect a little better. And then I even took some different faster ones and so forth that I knew would be noisier, but I did it anyways for safeties. But look at how many I took. Just being up there now, I was only up there, I calculated from the times of these images, it was over 12 minutes, but I took 33 sets, 95 frames, all just to come up with one final image. Now, I could have come up with 2 or 3 versions of that image. I just happened to like the way this one came together, and it portrays, that station. It portrays energy and motion by doing some the light trail effect on the train leaving the station.
So John, so you blended some of those 95 shots to get this one, or this was?
Yeah,
you did. Okay.
that's right. So
how many shots?
Yeah, the final shot is probably a blend of maximum of 4 exposures, maybe only 3. I can't quite recall on this one. I'm going to show a couple more coming up where it's more precise than this that I can show you. But yeah, these kinds of images, they don't just happen with go shoot fast and go shoot something else. They are intentional. I was bopping around. I bought my day pass on the L, and I was going between a couple different key shoot areas that I had an interest in, and because I even shot that location earlier just to get myself familiar with the conditions for it, but I knew I wanted a nighttime shot there. So let's go into a few other areas, and I'll show you how I process a couple of these too a little bit. One of the things that you want to use daytime or nighttime is a lens hood. So for those of you who are getting into photography or a little bit newer with it, using a lens hood is going to help assist in stopping light from hitting the front element of the lens at angles, which causes lens flare. It takes away contrast quality of the lens. This is trying to show you some examples here once this comes up on your screen, where on the left side you're getting some lens flare up in this area, if you can see my pointer, and you're even getting some faded contrast quality compared to the same image with just the lens hood added. No filters, just the lens hood. And they're doing the same thing down there. So using the lens hood is very important. And of course, it even acts as a protector for the lens in case you drop something that you don't want to. Also on lens equipment here, polarizer is something that can be good for architectural photography, especially if there's some reflections in glass that you want to remove. So for that reason, a polarizer can be very good. You got to be careful with them because they usually drop down light sensitivity a couple of stops, but a lot of times for architectural shooting where it doesn't really matter anyway, you're on a tripod and you've got a long time to be able to take a long shutter speed, that doesn't really matter, but the polarizer is going to help in those cases. I guess the main point I wanted to make here is even for those who believe in using UV or haze filters to protect their lens, you really should be taking that thing off, especially with nighttime photography, because no matter how high a quality that extra pane of glass is in front of your lens, this is helping show 3 different brands. This was a Nikon 50mm with no filter whatsoever on the front. And whenever there's a point source of light, which you have plenty usually in architectural photography, even if it isn't nighttime, from windows and things like that. But here you can see same lens, but with a Tiffin filter on it. Look at the flare coming from the point source light. This is complete a creation of that front filter element. And so this one's the smallest, and this one happens to be a Hoya. Here's a B&W, but you just can't get away from that ghosting problem. So get rid of them when you're doing high quality architectural shooting. Another thing that I have, you can use jackets or shirts or material if you want to, but I have one of these lens skirts. They do cost, I think, about $45 or $50, but it sure is a great device because it's got the little suction cups, and every time that you're going to shoot through glass, whether it's indoors or indoor shooting outside, especially at nighttime where there's going to be reflections, it just makes it so easy to use any lens that you want, and it very easily wraps around the any size lens, and it's not as, you still have to maneuver the camera and so forth carefully, and also if you're using a wide angle lens, you got to be sure that you're not catching the edges of the lens skirt itself. So therefore you have to do a little scooching around sometimes, but it's a very valuable device and very easy to carry in the camera bag with you. So this is just an example, one of my shots of nighttime from John Hancock building, shooting through the glass, and I used the lens skirt in order to be sure that I was getting a clean shot, even though I was in the restaurant with, all the table lights and everything reflecting off of the glass windows. Got a funny look though from the waitress. And then this is another example. This is out in Salt Lake City. So that's the Temple Square. That's the Mormon, temple. And the sky is all smoked up from wildfire smoke, but it still turned out to be a pretty nice little shot there in the evening time from the building across the street from the temple. But that's, again, an example. There was lots of reflections on those windows, and I was seeing people try to get up there and get close. Obviously, if you put your camera right up close on the window, you can try to help eliminate them, but then you still have reflections coming in from the sides. Other camera settings, some of these are pretty basic things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you always need to be shooting raw image files if you can, in order to maintain as much resolution as you can and maintain as much depth of information as possible, from the darks to the lights to the colors. That's enough said on that. I already talked about shooting in live view mode, so that you're making sure by shooting with the camera on a solid tripod and then shooting in live view mode on a DSLR, that locks up the mirror, or you can set to lock up the mirror, and you really don't want the shake from the mirror either. Again, focus is such a critical component of good architectural photography, so you want to eliminate any problems that might cause shake to the camera. And also, you can use the 2-second delay timer built into the camera. You can use a remote release. It's easier to use a remote release if you're walking around and setting up quickly and so forth. I still use a 2-second delay timer quite often before I have the camera go ahead and do multiple brackets automatically. So those are some more basics. Another thing that I learned a lesson on, now this was some years back, and some of the new cameras may not have the same problem, but you definitely don't want to be using image stabilization or vibration reduction modes on lenses when you're using a tripod, because especially older model cameras with those systems, when it's stable on a tripod, the image stabilization system will actually do motion and cause blurring. And I learned that the hard way. You don't want to go out and do an excursion and learn that coming back that you completely messed up your focus just because of that.
Yeah, some newer lenses don't do that. You got to check with your manufacturer the lens that you're trying to use, because some of them actually now say you should put your image stabilization on a tripod. So it depends on the lens.
Yeah, and it isn't always just the lens, is it? It's also the steady shot built in, or the what they're doing now in these new cameras to accommodate for vibrations. I normally, like I said earlier, I'm shooting in manual mode. If you were going to shoot in any other mode, I suppose I would be choosing aperture mode, because normally the shutter is the last thing of importance. You're prioritizing to setting the right aperture so that you're controlling your depth of field focus area, but also you want to try and be shooting your lenses at their best performance areas, which usually is in the f8 to f11 range. That's where they're normally the sharpest. And it does depend on the lens, though, and it's easy to go online and look up the specifics on particular lenses to find out where their sweet spots are. But the shutter speed is the variable, because normally for architecture, if it's exterior and there's clouds moving, those are moving and they'll be affected by your shutter speed, of course. But the building isn't normal, and bridges might be swaying, right? But I mean, anyways, the shutter speed is the thing that you can usually push way on out and not worry about it, because you're on a tripod and the subject matter itself is stable and steady. Now this is just to address starburst effects. This is from the 18th Street Bridge, which is in Chris's book and is on a lot of Chicago picture photo tours and so forth. They go to the 18th Street Bridge to get the train station. And so this is nighttime, and you can see I've got quite a starburst going on for all of those lamps. And this was at this is when I was shooting the Canon 5D3 with their 16 to 35 millimeter wide angle zoom lens at f11, and you can see the burst effect that that has. That particular lens is known for good starburst effect. This is, you can do your own tests quickly at home. Just turn the lights off, turn a small, flashlight on, which is what I did here just to demonstrate. So this is a Sony Zeiss 55 millimeter. There's how much starburst effect you have at f4. And then I'll flip, and I'm now on f8. You guys are with me. And now I have changed to f11. And you can see that the starburst effect is getting more and more defined. Usually f11 is good enough, but I've also showing here, the next picture is f16. It's even larger, the burst effect, and I could go all the way up to f22. So there you can see the f22, where you're actually starting to see multiple beams within each beam, but that's because that's a LED flashlight that has 3 LEDs in it, and you can actually see the beams from each LED within each of those. That's what's causing that. Then the other thing about starburst is that if you have a lens that has rounded blades, aperture blades, like this one does. This is a Zeiss Spatus lens that I have, a prime 18 millimeter, and it's extremely sharp and very good quality lens. And yet with the rounded aperture blades, it's a horrible lens if you want to have starburst effect on lamps and point sources. And I'm just demonstrating there, I'm showing f11 on the left all the way to f22 or f16 in the middle. It doesn't really make any difference because the thing just doesn't do a good job on those. And then this is another one. This page shows 4 different apertures of a completely different lens. Again, you can see again how different it looks. The number of aperture blades inside the lens helps determine how many star points there are to the burst effect. Moving on, I normally, for ISO, I normally shoot at the base ISO in order to have the best dynamic range and performance out of the camera. Again, we can increase shutter speed in order to accommodate for a low ISO, even if it's darker interiors and so forth, it gives you better dynamic range. Move on past some of this stuff. Exposure metering, I normally bracket in order to be safe, even if I may not end up needing any extra bracketing. But there oftentimes with architecture can be quite a dynamic range. I'm going to talk about that in a minute by showing it rather than just talking about it. And there I'm just talking about auto bracketing. So obviously you have to learn how to use auto exposure bracketing on the camera if you're going to be using that feature. So that's what this page is going to show now. The center image for this facility, which is an exposition center in Melbourne, this was several years ago, but it was all lit up at nighttime. And the normal exposure is going to actually have overexposed lighting on the inside of the building and underexposed dark areas. There's a beautiful wood walkway deck going on there and other things. So I took it with 5 exposures back then. I was shooting 5 exposures. So the darkest one on the top left is going to have even the lamps inside, the brightest ones are not going to be overexposed. And of course, down on the bottom right, by auto bracketing and going up almost 4 stops from normal, we've got now all the detail for the decking and even down in the river area and shadows. So all of those can be put together. Now, over the years, I've used different types of techniques or software to do HDR combining or blending of the images. I don't know what I used for this one. It might have been Photomatics. But at least in the final result is you can bring up whatever detail levels you want in the shadowed areas, what you think you want. And of course, we can still see inside the expo center clearly and cleanly without anything being blown out. So that's how I handle the wide dynamic range going on. White balance settings, I'm normally not too concerned about that with architectural, because if you're shooting raw, it makes really no difference in the end, because you're going to reset the white balance even oftentimes selectively in different parts of the image. That's why I threw this one in here later, because this one actually has a cooler white balance near the tops. This is one of the Riverwalk shots from downtown Chicago, and a little bit warmer white balance down along the walkway itself. Hopefully that picture has come through by now. And then the next one is just a warmer white balance setting, so downtown. But you got to remember that there is no way that your camera is ever going to do a good job if it's set on auto white balance to set the correct white balance for these kinds of evening shots or even interior shots. It's unreliable. So next, very, very key and important component, at least to me, for my type of architectural photography, is wide angle lenses. And the higher the quality you can afford, the better. And I'll show you why in a minute. And of course, the resolution of the camera, the more I guess the better the camera you can afford for that to get higher resolutions, gives you a lot more potential as well. The lenses that I'm currently shooting with, I don't really shoot very often with the zoom type of a lens for architectural work, but this is an expensive and a high quality zoom. This is the 16 to 35 Sony, but there's the same type of high quality versions in the other brands as well. The one that's my favorite for shooting architectural goes back to my Canon days. Even though I'm shooting the Sony bodies now, I just use an adapter. This is a completely manual lens. This is a tilt shift lens. It's a 17 millimeter. And I basically don't use it for tilt purposes. I use it for shift purposes, and I'll show that in just a minute. And it's a prime lens though, and it's very, very high resolution. It's very sharp. And this Batis 18 millimeter is an extremely sharp lens, so I enjoy using it once in a while where I don't need the shifting capabilities of the tilt shift lens. And I also have for ultra wide, even though I bought this more for astrophotography, it's the Sigma Art Series 14 millimeter lens. That's an f1.8 lens. It's fantastic for that, for astro, but even for architecture, it has very little distortion for being such a wide angle lens on a full frame camera. Remember, a 14 millimeter on a full frame would be less than 10 millimeters on a crop frame camera. So it's a very wide lens. So the problem with wide angle lenses though is that compared to what you're actually photographing, they've got any combination of pincushion distortion or barrel distortion. And we need to correct for that in post-processing, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute here. And I put these in here to help demonstrate also how important it is with a wide angle lens to establish solid tripod settings for the camera. And if you're going to want to keep your vertical lines and horizontal lines straight on a wide angle lens, you must pay very close attention to that, what's on here called the vanishing point, the center focal point of that lens. It needs to be level. And if it's perfectly level, you can see by the lines demonstrated in this picture that we've got, perfectly straight vertical lines and horizontal lines. It's when you aim that thing up from dead center that all of a sudden, I wish they put the lines on here, but you can see the tilting of the building inwards towards the top if you're aiming it up. And then here's the example right next to it if I were to aim that wide angle lens any angle down. So that doesn't mean that you can't take those pictures with a wide angle lens on an oblique angle of some sort, but you want to minimize the angle as much as possible to still get the framing that you need. And then you've got to realize that you've got to get more into your frame because you're going to have to make corrections in your post-processing software afterwards, and that means you're going to lose a part of your framing. And you've got to accommodate for that. Otherwise, you might lose something very important in the image. So what I'd like to do is switch my screen to Lightroom very quickly. I think I can do that here somewhere. Let me see. I think I can do it this way. There we go. And I've got it open already to an image that'll just, I'm going to do this very quick, not waste a lot of time, but I want to show you a couple of aspects in Lightroom. Now remember, Adobe Camera Raw is part of Photoshop. So if you don't use Lightroom, you can do exactly what I'm going to show you in Lightroom over in Photoshop, just using Camera Raw. And even in regular Photoshop, where they're actually doing pixel manipulations completely, they've got wide angle lens features in there too to deal with this. But one of the aspects that takes care of the lens distortions is that this on the right side, I'm clicking into lens corrections. And normally most of the post-processing software now has archives of the popular lenses and popular camera configurations. So all you really have to do is enable profile corrections. And this already knows that this is a Sony lens. It's the 24-105 model lens. And they've got a profile already built in to correct for the distortions that are inherent in that lens. So I'll just unclick it, and I realize this isn't very responsive right now, so I don't even know when it refreshes for you. But unclick is going to have some rounded aspects to it. When you click it, it straightens out things that were not perfectly straight before. And you don't have to use the vignetting if you don't want to, but it also will correct for lens vignetting. This one doesn't have a lot of lens vignetting anyways, and I'm just going to turn that part off. So that's what lens corrections are for. But transform is what's for straightening your lines, which is critical for architectural photography, unless if you want to stylize a photo where you do want converging lines and you do want them angled. But normally we don't. So this is a city hall in Austin, a shot that I had from down there. And it's got various ways that you can do it. In fact, you've even got all these levers for vertical corrections, manual. I'll go both ways real quick. But actually, I'll just bypass so that I don't take too much time with this. Let's put this guy back to the center. One of the ways that's kind of the most accurate, and I think a lot of people bypass it or don't know about it or realize how to use it, is the guided method. Oh, this thing is really not very responsive for me. But there's this area right here in the top left corner of the transform tool, and it's called guided. And what you can do is it offers a way to go to what should be a straight vertical line. I'll do first. It automatically zooms in to help you position your cursor, and then you hold down, on your mouse or whatever, and then you go down to the end of that straight structure and let go. And now it knows one line in this photo that needs to be straight. Then I could go over, and here's another building that I know needs to be straight. So I'll just go grab that guy and draw down. So now I'm on my second line and make sure that's aligned with that edge of that building. And just do this quickly here. So now what it's done is it's straightened the verticals, but it hasn't straightened the horizontal yet, and it can do that too. So now I know that this railing or roof railing area is straight, so horizontal. So I'm gonna pick on that and draw one line across that to the other side and drop that. And now I've got the 3 points, and it has made all the adjustments to make the perspective straight and accurate. So that's easy. And then what you would want to do is don't use the constrain crop button, because it will pick and automatically crop this image, perhaps not in a way that you want. Instead, what you can do now is you can go up to the cropping tool, and you can literally pick your own dimensions for the crop the way that you want to, because the way that they have it programmed, it's most of the time not going to do it right automatically. And here I might want to completely eliminate that flag, because if I want to get down as low as I can to the ground, the flagpole doesn't make it all the way. So, and then maybe I've got too much sky. So there we go. There's my crop. I can close that, and now I'm done. So now I've got a perspective corrected vertical lines and horizontal lines image compared to what we started with. So these features in the software are just getting terrific to use, and eliminates a lot of needs sometimes for you know, what you used to have to use for a tilt shift lens for. So now I'm going to go from current slide back into my program here. The next thing I'm going to show very quickly is a way of blending to fix bright light areas, since there's such dynamic range in night city shots in Photoshop, that doesn't use HDR processing. So all I have here is a normal exposure on the screen right now of Seattle at night from the park, that's a famous park for everybody to go to and take the pictures. And then I've got a darker exposure, shorter shutter speed shot of the same scene. So I've got 2 frames. And if I put both of those frames into Photoshop on 2 layers, and I put my brighter layer on the top and my darker layer beneath it, and then I go to the right of my layer and I right click and go to layer properties, I get this window. I realize this is very small on the screen, and I apologize for that. And on this window in the middle section are blending options. So now that's what is opened up on the screen right now, are the blending options. And what we're paying attention to here is blend if at the bottom. And there are these kind of knobs or arrows that you can slide to the right from the bottom, from the left side, or slide to the left from the right side. And in this case, as long as the brighter exposure is over the darker one, and if you hold the Control or Option key down while grabbing the left side of this and pull this lever all the way down, what Photoshop does is it only blends in, which is what I'm doing here, and then here's after the blend, here's before the blend. All it does is replace the brightest whites, which are blown out in this case, with the whites from the darker exposure that are not blown out. Consequently, now you can see the rungs on that Ferris wheel, and you can see the detail of whatever that is to the left of it that's bright. Over here, it was all blotchy because it was all blown out. So it's just a quick technique. A lot of people don't seem to know about Photoshop blend if use in layers. And then I just finished this off, but this is a finished image now where obviously the brightest areas have full detail, and yet we used a brighter exposure image to fill in more you know, of the detail on the sides of the buildings in the darker shadowed areas of those buildings and so forth. So blend if is what it's called. Luminar 4 has really come a long way. I use it, and this is just to show you an example of a straight-on building shot of the new headquarters in Milwaukee of the Northwestern Mutual. And it's fine, it's clean and clear and straight and everything like that, but it's boring as anything because it wasn't a good sky that afternoon and so forth. So Luminar makes it so easy to replace the sky, and they've got these other features like sun rays and so forth. So just using those two features in Luminar just transforms this image, as you can see. Now that sky was taken by me, and I shoot high resolution bodies, and I know that all of the skies that come automatically with Luminar 4 are low res skies. So I can't use any of them because they just don't match up to the rest of the image resolution wise. So I just put in my own skies that I take from around the house or wherever, and blend those in. But boy, Luminar 4 has really made it easy to blend in skies now and to add special effects like the sun rays. Another example of post-processing is how I do these interiors for full dynamic range. And this is just to help show how this one had been done. This one was shot with, this is a normal exposure frame right here, followed then by would be almost 4 stops down, then 2 stops down, 2 stops up, 4 stops up almost, creating one high dynamic range image that was processed in, now I use Aurora, I think it's Aurora 2019 to do this, but back then it could have been Easy HDR or Photomatics. And this is being taken now with a shift lens. So the top line of images is with the shift lens in the center. Then I shifted to the right and took the same set, but shifted right, shifted to all the way to the left on the shift lens and took the same series. And then because tilt shift lens, it has such a broad lens coverage to it, when you merge later, it merges perfectly. There are no flaws in doing a photo merge when you've used a shift lens. And so then this would be the 3 shifts put together, and then I final edited and add some vignetting. Vignetting in a lot of these adds the sense of depth. So this is the First Presbyterian Church downtown. It's right across the street from the John Hancock building. And so that's a 22 megapixel model camera, the older Canon 5D3, but by the time I've done this merging, it turned it into a 41 megapixel resolution image as well, which is good for bigger prints if you were to aspire to do some bigger prints. This one is done with the newer camera and newer, this is done with the tilt shift lens as well. And so same thing though, center and then shift left, shift right, three bracketed exposures, and then combined together in order to get that image. Now, had I not done that kind of bracketed shooting and then careful blending afterwards, you wouldn't have been able to see the proper color corrected imagery on the top of their dome. You wouldn't have been able to see even the window frames in the windows because they would have been blown out. So it is a way of retaining the details in the brightest of areas and the details in the most shadowed areas by doing that kind of high dynamic range processing. Again, it has to be done very carefully so that it doesn't look overdone and doesn't have halos. This is a vertical panorama using the tilt shift, and this actually shows you exact positions of the tilt shift. So if I shift up, I'm getting this frame that you see on the left. When I shift to the center position, I'm getting this frame that you see here. It's I tried to line these up so that you'd see the perspective. They overlap. And then when I shift down, I'm catching the floor. So I'm all the way up to the top of the dome on the ceiling and all the way down showing the floor and of course everything in between. And then that merges together perfectly because it's a shift lens. And then there's a vertical panorama of a very interesting structure. I never finished it for competition, or I would have taken out, you know, these people and so forth. But yeah, and then I also wanted to introduce these last two are the final things that I wanted to convey to you guys. This is blending, and it's blending different times of day. So this shot in Milwaukee is not one photo catch, not one set of bracketed images. Instead, what it is it at sunset time, and of course everybody realizes when the sun hits a hard edge, that's when you get sun flares, the starburst effect. So anyways, this is earlier in the evening. It was a nice sunset, and so I was clicking away, and you can see, of course, the buildings are all deep in shadows. There's no interest to the buildings going on at all, but it was a nice sunset, and we caught the sky and the sun. So then what I did is, from the same position, even though I went off and shot some other things, because this is probably an hour later, now it's gotten dark enough that the lights have been turned on inside the buildings. The sky is gone, the sun is gone, but the lights are on, and now we're using longer shutter times, so it's smoothened out the water in this particular case too, which is I didn't end up using in the final version. But here's the final version. So now what we've done is we've blended in the sunset sky and also used the nighttime with the lights turned on in order to end up with one final image. So that isn't really called compositing. That's just called blending. And then the last one I wanted to show is one of my new images, rather new images from downtown. And this is a blended image, but it's also composite, and I wanted to show how this one was done. This one is using the tilt shift lens from, I think it's the 7th floor of the Wells McKenzie parking garage, which is kind of across the corner, across the street from the Merchandise Mart. And it's the one place where, is it the purple and brown lines have this beautiful curved track and building. And so the shift center, no, this is shift left, 3 brackets. This is earlier in the evening when it's not quite sunset yet. This is center shift position, right shift position. Combine those together and do some nice color post-processing and so forth, and you end up with this image. You can see with that light that I was getting beautiful building reflections off of the glass office buildings, but a complete lack of anything interesting going on down here at the street level. So I waited, and you have to be patient. But I waited until the sun went down and the lights turned on. And so then I was taking the same shots with the lights on. So now you could see into the office building with the lights. You could see some of the lights down on the street. And these different shots also had people in different places, so it was easy to get rid of people later. I was taking a series of these shots at this time of evening, where the lights are on the L train, and of course the shutter speed, I was able to drag that or set it at shorter and longer shutter speed times to get an effect that I wanted. And then I picked that later. In this case, I let the whole thing be long enough to run all together. And then I blended all that together. But first, I wanted more interest in the sky, so this is a similar time of evening, sunset shot, literally out a window from where I live now on a nice evening. And so I put that together, That's not a Luminar sky replacement. That's a Photoshop manual sky replacement. But the compositing is the sky, and the blending is the daytime of the buildings, which is mostly up here higher. But then you can see how we can see inside the building because the lights are on. We've got the train light trail train going on, and we've also got the night lights on down on the street, and we don't have anything distracting down there, and we've got interesting reflected light. So there's the final composition, but you see what went into it. That's a blend and a composite. So that's what I've got. So we could open this up for any kind of question and answer if we wanted to. I wanted to put a couple of resources on the end of it here, the software that I'm currently using. Don't forget to look up Open House Chicago and go to it. It's a blast. If you've never been to it, it's super great to go to it. Doors Open Milwaukee is the same idea, over 2 days on a weekend, and theirs is usually about 2 weeks before Open House Chicago. And then, of course, get Chris's Photographer's Guide to Chicago. It's got lots of locations, many of which I just showed you my versions of images from, and then I put my contact information in there.
Yeah, there's some questions here. Let's see. Some of them you've already answered. How are you mounting your camera? From Mike. Not sure what he means there.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I did is every time that you use a tilt shift lens, for example, it's extremely critical that you take the time to set that up and set it straight, because otherwise you're diminishing the reason to even use a tilt shift lens if you're not going to make sure it's leveled correctly. But I've got a good tripod. It's stable. It's a good solid one that I also I think that one is one of those Enduros. It was similar to ones that were twice as expensive. It's not that it was cheap, but it was in that, I don't know, $450, $500 price range, but it's a good one. And then I'm using on that a $450 I think it's called a GPS Acrotech ball head, which allows me to even use like a gimbal, but also allows me to very easily, and then I'm using the L bracket on the camera body to make it simple to shift from, your portrait over to landscape, and not actually have to change usually anything about the tripod settings.
Right. Doug asks about, are you allowed to bring tripods into many of these locations?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Because Open House Chicago or Doors Open attract a lot of photographers, so they're pretty used to it. Now, they'll always say at particular places, when you can't, or they'll say you have to be very careful here so that you're not tripping people, things like that. Things like, you can also look up things like, did you know that there's always, right now I didn't just look it up, but there was 1 or 2 days every week that artists and photographers are allowed to use tripods up at Chicago 360, for example, at the John Hancock building. So there's no problems as long as you go at the right times. And of course, this is another good reason why you want to be a member of a club, because a lot of times when excursions are arranged for club members, those kinds of things have been already pre-arranged, where you can use tripods when you go with the club, even though the place or the facility doesn't normally allow you to.
Another question from John's iPad. Tell us a little about your composition technique / strategy. How much do you pre-visualize versus improvising?
I That's an interesting question, because these kinds of things come almost automatically when I'm presented any new, location option, and I'll walk around and I'll preview, of course, things. Like I told you, I even took the train around town, downtown, to pre-scope locations that I already had in mind that I wanted to shoot pictures at. I wanted to know what I was getting into with the different ones, and know ahead of time, because a lot of times, even in architecture photography, you are time dependent too, because you may be doing something that's shooting outside and you want to get it at the right light, and you definitely, if it's a new location to you, you will have wanted to have scoped it out first to know where you really are going to want to set up and be positioned when the light is right, right? And but I don't know how to describe my composition philosophy. It's developed, I think. I've been doing this for quite a few years now, and I've joined conferences, I've taken courses, you name it, and everybody has their philosophies, and and now I've got mine.
Another question, which you kind of partially answered, about whether you do any processing on each image before you merge them, or do you just merge the raw images and then do mostly post-processing on that?
Yeah, it's mostly, they're pretty close to raw when I do them. However, when I'm merging them, I am normally doing the lens correction aspect first, and normally I'm also doing the chromatic aberration correction along with lens correction. Those kinds of things. I might even have decided already what kind of basic color balance I want to have to those raw images. So I do that kind of basic level. I don't do much in the way of sharpening the image at all. Do the combination, because any of the sharpening and detail processing and so forth, I want to be doing after they've been combined already or merged together as a final image. And most of the time, I'm using both Adobe Lightroom to do the HDR process and Aurora. But I've noticed that Adobe Lightroom, for me anyway, seems to really have the most problems when there's ghosting of any kind. And their ghosting algorithm sometimes just leaves artifacts if you're a pixel peeper like I am. And Aurora does a better job in those circumstances. And sometimes it's a toss-up. They come off looking a little bit different. But one thing, and sometimes I'm only using 1 or 2 images and doing that blending style of work over in Photoshop rather than using any HDR automatic process at all. More so now than ever before, because I'm getting, more experience doing it that way. I hope that helps.
Yeah, Mike Trahan has some more information on his question, and I've unmuted him. So Mike, go ahead. Okay, Mike, it's not working out, so never mind.
Mike, you were coming through like one of the 3 chipmunks.
Yeah. For the Seattle needle, which layer was brighter in the stack, and which layer did you blend?
In the stack, the lighter normal exposure was on top. And therefore, in blend if, I was using the controls, the top controls. There's 2 controls, right? There's one on top and there's one on bottom, and I'm using the top one.
John, I think what Mike was trying to ask is on your early shots, where you were down low is how you had your camera set.
What do you mean?
Well, was it down, camera low was the, because when you were shooting from very low, is your camera, do you put your camera down on the floor ever, or how do you get?
Oh, yes.
Away?
Yeah. And yeah, from low positions, absolutely. So the tripods can usually, the legs are not the problem. It can be the centerpiece. So sometimes, and of course, all serious landscape photographers don't even buy a tripod that has a centerpiece to it at all, because they so often want to get a very low to the ground perspective. I actually found that the centerpiece on that Enduro is still low enough for me to get the perspective from below the seating level, let's say, to the ground. And one of the things about using a shift lens is that you can manually shift, and it appears like you are lower than you physically are. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how shift lenses work.
Actually, I had a question about that. When you're using, because I have the Canon 24 tilt shift lens, do you use the shifting and then find that you still have to do the profile correction in Lightroom?
Well, only if I wasn't careful enough to get myself squared away on my tripod settings.
Okay.
You don't want to if you don't have to, if all you're doing is maybe a little rotation, because in theory, you're losing a tad bit of resolution when you start to actually do the angling inside of Photoshop, although it's so darn good now, I don't think anybody would ever see it.
Another question from our buddy Richard Fisher asks, are you willing to lead a club through Chicago once the pandemic is over?
Well, we've already done that 2 or 3 times for the Lake County Camera Club, and we've usually done that around in August or so, maybe August, September. So I'm happy to join in. It takes more than one person to be responsive to a bus-sized group of people, but I got buddies, or we could even get Chris involved. I suppose I'm cheaper than him, but
who isn't? Sorry, Chris.
That doesn't mean I'm better than him, though.
How do you take the pics without people, or do you Photoshop them out?
I do. If I were to go back a few slides here, I didn't mention it, but I can show you an example. And that's why I was even talking, I would have, had I been prepping one for competition that I showed you there that had people in it, I would have taken care of it. Notice this image right here, the First Presbyterian across from John Hancock, and look down the center aisle and look to the, oh, come on, it's on the tip of my tongue now. Anyways, you don't see any people, right? Or at least you don't see them in the middle where there was a whole group of people. So if I back up one more step here, there you go. See all the people? I guess this isn't very large for you to see that, but there's a whole bunch of people blocking, the detailed woodwork. So yeah, that took time. Not only did I have to mimic manually all of the tile flooring going where the people were, but I also had to mimic all of the detail in the woodwork that they were hiding. so that we got back to having what it looked like without people in front of it. And there was no choice. When I took that shot, I was lucky to get it as people free as I was, because this was open house Chicago. That's the one unfortunate thing about, you know, going into some of these places and trying to get the right images for competition or something like that when there's so many people. But that's a perfect example right there. I take them out. Unless if they served a good purpose for the photo.
Well, I think that's the end of the questions. Unless anybody else wants to put a question quickly in the chat, I think we'll just say thank you very much to John Williams.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'll stop sharing my screen.
That was a fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed it. Very, very good. 2 thumbs up.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it. We'll have this recording up on our website, hopefully sometime soon, for a little while at least, for our club members. And, you know, we want to thank you again. That was truly awesome. You're a
now everybody get out there and take some pictures of architecture.
You're a terrific photographer. We really enjoyed it.
All righty.
All righty. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good night. Stay safe.